Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as you know, your definitive leadership growth podcast. Now, we're going to have an opportunity, as we do every week. I have amazing guests on the show where we get to sit and just jam about leadership. We talk leadership and entrepreneurship and business and management, and we go where the conversation takes us so we keep it organic. You have an opportunity to learn and grow from each of these people's successes. You can learn and grow and try and maybe avoid some of the failures they've encountered on their path to the top to where they're at. I have a good friend of the show. He was on, right about a year ago. We were just talking before the show. Today, I bring back Mr. Alexander Vasquez, who is the CEO of Aviator Media. He does video marketing, strategy consulting. He is a husband going into 19 years, just like me. We're going into 19 years with my wife as well. 4 daughters, and certainly an advocate for leadership and ownership and entrepreneurship. So I am really excited, Alexander, to have you back on the show and have a conversation with you today. Thanks for making the time and joining me on the Leadership Toolkit.
Thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be back.
Absolutely. If you would do me a favor, and we'll just sort of give the lead in again, give that 3-minute elevator pitch. Who are you? What's your background? What's the background in leadership and entrepreneurship? If someone maybe didn't see the last show, it was interesting because I looked back as we were getting ready to talk today, and when we talk about leadership and entrepreneurship, and there's all these different venues that we can talk about. I think I titled the last show we were on, it's the Leadership Toolkit, Leadership and Life, because we covered a whole lot of ground the last time. So if you would just share a bit of that background with the audience and who you are, what you do.
No, I'm basically I own Aviator Media, and we help businesses with their branding and their marketing through video, doing video, ads, content creation, consulting, strategy. But that's what we do for a living. And when I say we, I'm talking about my wife and I and our team. But more than anything else, I consider myself first and foremost a husband and a father. Definitely a family guy. As you know too, like seeing the kids just get older puts us in a very weird spot at this moment. You go from like spending the first 10 years of your kid's life hardcore, making sure that they're safe, that they're okay. Then they start entering those teen years and they start pushing back a little bit. They start having their own personality, with a little bit of stubbornness thrown in there. And then I just had this conversation earlier today with somebody that it's like a double-edged sword, because you want your kids to be able to grow up and be able to think for themselves. But then at the same time, they start leaving that area where they trust everything that you say. And, now it's kind of like they have to make their own decision. Whereas when they were younger, they would just kind of go along with what you said. And I often compare family and business together, which is why I think we ended up going into life and business last time, because when we are talking to clients, or if you are B2C and you're talking to your customers, in many ways they're coming to you with hopefully they're trusting you and they're coming to you for some advice, and the last thing that they want is to be left off in a worse place than before they met you. And in that vein, not only do you have to be the example, but a lot of times you also have to inform your clients, inform your customers, kind of meet them where they're at on their customer journey, if you will, and help them to understand something, not because you say it's that way and you're the marketing guy, or you do video. Like, you have to help them understand it, because if they can understand it and they can see the vision that you're trying to translate to them, or you can see where you're trying to help them go, if they can clearly understand that, then they're on board, and then certainty is close. And you working with your background, about sales and about marketing, and that one of the core components of any of that is creating certainty in that person. I know you asked me to do a pitch, but I totally bypassed our pitch just to jump into the conversation. So
no, I love it, man. Here's one of the things, and I love the direction that you're going, that I hear it when we talk about leadership and life, and you go from this area when we're talking about kids, and I think this definitely bridges the gap to leadership as well. You said it, like, we go from this blind trust, right? Of, okay, well, I'm going to do that because I said so, to now when we're talking about family, they need to know why. And I think that's really, really important when we talk about, business and leadership, and especially right now. I think we've seen an evolution in the business side of things, it used to be a more authoritarian style of management and even entrepreneurship. Like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to go this direction. And everybody would fall in line and say, okay, yeah, sounds fair. Let's go do it. And would you agree with that? Are you seeing that more in business,
Yeah.
especially as you're engaging with clients that like they're saying, yeah, okay, Alexander, I trust you and I appreciate that you're bringing that to the table, but why are we doing this?
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, it's almost like, again, comparing it to the way a lot of us, I think you and I are pretty much the same generation. I might be older, I'm not sure, but I think, many of us, we grew up with a little bit heavier handed parents. Yeah, at least mine were, and a lot of people that I talked to, they grew up with
Oh
kind of
yeah.
heavy parents, very strict, because they were trying to make sure that you were able to handle your thing or whatever. But they were definitely a lot harder. You couldn't have open conversations about stuff. It was pretty much this is the way it is, blah blah blah. And then you have your children, and maybe with your first set of children, at least and I speak from personal experience. I think we were good parents to what we were working with tool wise, but the oldest girls that we have, they definitely got like however I was raised. So thankfully for my wife, I think we talked about this last time too, that my wife just has a very easy nature about her.
Hmm.
Her demeanor is just very relaxed. She can redirect, a child's anxiety into something else. So it's just she's like, Snow White and all that. You know what I mean? That's pretty much how she is. But I was working with the tools that I had from my father and my mother, and they were great parents, but they were just strict. Anyways, third child, fourth child, you start to realize over time that, no, you got to meet them kind of where they're at. And you see the fruits of working with the old tools and working with these newer tools. And you start to wish, well, I wish I had these tools back then.
Sure.
In the same vein, I think a lot of people were getting used to that whole Steve Jobs approach, where like you just kind of had to be like this like hard, heavy, pounding person. Like it's the way it is from my hierarchy, wherever I'm at, blah blah blah. To over time now opening up to like real dialogue and real conversation, like to the point like with our team, like we have I'm sure you know this, but when you're putting a commercial together, you have a storyboard, you have a script, you have all these
Sure.
things. A lot of times though, depending on the videographer that's on the shoot, I'll usually give them some creative freedom, um, as long as we get certain shots. But by all means, go ahead and own that and create it the way you want to do it, because that's why they're in that spot also, because they're creators. And maybe as a creative, I'm sympathetic to that. But I think if you were to go back 20 years ago, it was pretty much do this X, Y, and Z. So now it's more collaborative as opposed to like it's my way or the highway. And I think we have to adapt to that type of situation, because that's literally this next generation. That's how they're working. And I think we talked about this last time too, we may not
Hmm.
agree with everything that the younger generation, like how they view things, but at least in that aspect, the way they're socially collaborating on things and they want to be a part of something as opposed to being told what to do, we got to meet them there if we want to have those kids be committed to whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish and work.
I absolutely agree with you. One of the things that I heard you say here is that, you have people taking ownership over it. It's interesting because we've done that where you're going into we're getting a cameraman, or you have an ad agency come in and they start doing the recording. And this is something I learned from our dealership owner as well, where he was like, hey, he's asking, hey, do you think this is a good shot? Do you think there's a better way to approach it? And you see that blossom when people start to say, oh, okay, like my opinion is valuable, right? Because and here's the unique thing, just like what you're saying, hey, if you'd gone back 20 years, we're doing it this way. We're gonna that this is the storyboard, these are the shots that we need, this is the script that we're going to use.
Right.
Well, you have a unidirectional view based on your experience. And the irony is, if people stop for a moment, and leaders, managers, folks, you've got to hear this. If you stop for a moment and you ask that cameraman, you ask that producer, because how many different shoots has that cameraman been on?
Right.
Right? He or she doesn't have that unidirectional view of Well, you're going into it with blinders on, so to speak, and they're saying, "Well, hey, this worked for another place, or have you considered this?" Because it can open up that whole other world. So I think that's really valuable that you bring that up early on, as you're talking about, hey, create some ownership with people. I'm just curious as we head down this path, and you know how I roll. I sit here and take notes. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about creating ownership, besides just asking an opinion, because I think that's something just from the conversation we had last time and the interactions we've had, I feel like that's something you do really well as a CEO of your company, as you help create ownership with other people. What are two or three other tactical things that you might tell other leaders or managers that are listening in, hey, do this and do this, because we've seen growth. We've seen people take ownership. We've seen people start to answer their own questions and blossom. Do you have some other suggestions that work to engage with staff on that?
No, yeah, I appreciate that, and also what I'm going to say isn't anything sexy or brand new, but I mean, if you're asking me what I have seen work, what I employ, or at least I try my best to employ, because obviously I'm faulty as well,
Sure.
Um, but definitely like leading by example is one of the biggest ones because it is hard to get somebody to get on board and follow you into battle if you've never battled. You know what I mean? If you have
True.
never sat in the front and just speared on and charged, like for example, just with sales calls, for example, people who, you know, I think we have a pretty good sales structure, and but there are some people who want to get into sales, but they, there's that fear of making the first cold call, and there's a fear of
Sure.
making, the first, um, cold email outreach or whatever, and
Sure.
so I think they have to see you do that. And I think as a leader, you have to be patient enough to work with, like I said, meet them where they're at, so to speak, and actually show them what to do. But when you're training them or correcting them, trying to do it in a way, just the same way that you would do it with, I like to compare it to like when you're first dating somebody. Uh,
Okay.
you're really attracted to this girl and she makes a mistake. You do not jump down on her and like, what are you doing? Da, 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 da. What are you, stupid or something? You don't do that. Why? But like 10 years down the road, you see some husbands who probably do that because they've gotten so comfortable with that person, right? I mean, you see it all the
Sure.
time. They do it with their kids. But I think that if you treat somebody just like that, just as special as you did in the beginning when you first were interested in that one person, if you treat your employees that way, if managers actually treat their employees as valuable as they actually are, because they actually are super valuable to the outcomes that are going on a day to day, you got to give them the tools. You got to lead by example. Um, I think that you have to take the time to actually show them what to do, so that way there's a clear understanding that they've seen you do it. It's written down somewhere. You've trained them, or you've assigned somebody to train them. So there's this constant repetition happening, and there's this constant feedback loop. So that way, 4 weeks down the line, they're a totally different person because they have no excuse at this point. And so I think that's a big one, is leading by example. I think the other thing is letting people try their ideas. As an owner and as a CEO, I think as long as you're confident that their idea isn't going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars in mistakes, right? I think you have to let some people go ahead and take a creative decision, um, and see how that rolls. Because one of two things is going to happen. They'll never be able to say that you didn't give them a chance to prove themselves or to try out their thing, and that you don't listen. And then,
Sure.
and let's just say it flops. It's okay. But the thing is, you want entrepreneurs, as they say, right? You want that risk
Sure.
taker inside of your company within bounds, right? To do that, because that's the way your company is going to grow. We don't know everything, even as fathers, even as husbands. We, as badly as we want to control and know 1,000% of everything with our awareness and all this other stuff, it's impossible for any one person to know any one thing. And some of the best ideas come from those people if you just give them a chance. You know, the other thing that could happen after giving that person a chance is it actually works, and you just discovered a more efficient way or more productive way that yields crazy results that you weren't even expecting. And you know, now you start implementing that. So you got to give people a chance to be able to try new things, even if that wasn't initially part of the plan.
I love it. And I actually took five things from it. I know you said three, but I took five from it. And the reason I chuckled is because you're saying, "Hey, you got to give them a chance as an owner." And for people that are that higher level that are listening to this show, right? If you're an executive, you're a CEO, you're an entrepreneur owner of your company, And when he's saying you got to give him a chance. The reason I chuckled about it is because I've had people that were willing to give me the chance, and it has cost thousands of dollars. And I hate to say it, but it's like that's one of the things that I've learned, and then it helps create and fuel that passion, because also I had that ownership, and I'm like, okay, well, how do I fix this?
Yeah.
How do I figure it out? And I started to ask myself better questions in business on how I could fix the thing that may have cost that money. So I want to recap this because I love it, Alexander. I just love having these conversations with you. So I took 5 things and I'll reframe this or repeat it because I asked the question. I said, okay, well, how do you create ownership with your people? How do you create ownership with your staff and so forth? And the 5 things I took, you said, 1 is ask people's opinions and value them. And I'm reframing this. You stop me if I got anything wrong, but
No.
Ask opinions and value them. You said lead by example, and your comparison there when you're talking about sales calls, it has been my experience, and I'm going to go off on a tangent on this one because I have had sales managers. You have had sales managers. You out there in podcast land have had sales managers. Well, you just do this and you take this script and then you go do that. And that individual is like super nervous. They're scared to pick up the phone. You're scared to make the initial contact. And one of the best things you can do is say, okay, I got it. And you go pick up the phone and do it for them.
Yep.
And I've worked for management. We've all done this where they're like, no, just go do it. And it's because they're scared. They're scared of the outcome.
Oh, yeah.
They're scared to fail in front of the person that they're telling, hey, this works. And so you have to have, if you're going to request it or certainly demand it of somebody else, demand that excellence or whatnot, you have to be willing to take that step. And, maybe you do fail on the sales call, but then they'll see that and they'll know you're human and they'll realize, okay, it is okay to fail. It's more important to make the call than it is to be scared of the potential outcome, good or bad. You said, I reworded this, but I like this and I think it's valuable. Treat people like it's day one.
Yeah. Yep.
I think like you were likening it to dating and so forth.
Yeah.
Like you have this certain engagement when you just start dating somebody. We do the same thing with staff. We're courting them, right? They come in and we're like, oh, we're so excited. And we do all the training here and so forth. What if you, at year 5, you were still treating that individual like day 1? Your business will explode. And then you said number 4 was training. We have to not, don't just talk about it, but be about it. Actually do the training with them. Yeah. And then number 5, we said, I wrapped up at the end, but let people try their ideas. And one of the things I think we fall in the trap of, or it's easy to fall in the trap of in business, is because you go, yeah, sure, Alexander, sure, Mike, we want you to try that idea. But on the inside, you're going, what if it doesn't work?
What if it fails? So
you withhold, right? That you hold back and you go, well, yeah, you could try that idea. I remember first starting, like, for example, Facebook marketing, and you dip your toe in the water. It's like, oh, you can go spend $500. Well, $500 doesn't do anything, right? $5,000 does make a dent. And so I would encourage you, if you're in a leadership role and you're hearing this, ask a better question. Change the question to what if it works?
Right. And to any employee that's listening or watching this who feels frustrated with somebody who's not giving them a chance or anything like that, I still say you find, a way to, like, for example, let's just say the Facebook, and just use your example. Mm-hmm. $5,000 for Facebook ads would go a long way, or at least further than, $500, whatever. Sometimes those constraints force you to get even more creative. And, sure. and so even though it's, boss, just give me a shot. Everybody else is doing this. We're the only one in this area that's not doing it, or nobody else in the area is doing it. We'd be the first ones to do this. Like, it'll give us a leg up. And resistance, whatever, that forces you to then find a way. Maybe you just go off on your own somehow, create a Facebook page for, I'm not telling anybody to do this. I'm just riffing here. But like,
I hear you.
You create it for your own, if you're a car salesperson, you create it for your own brand, and you invest your own $500, $50 in it, and then show proof to, your manager. Who knows? The point is, sometimes the manager can meet you, or the owner can meet you halfway with your request, compromising maybe to a lower degree. Like, well, no, I don't want to give you $10,000 to do this thing, but maybe I can give you $1,000. And I guarantee you, thankfully nowadays, most managers and owners are more welcome to that idea or that conversation as opposed to you just coming in and complaining about something without any solution.
Right.
Like that's the last thing anybody wants to hear. Nobody wants to hear anybody complain or come up without at least some type of solution to the problem.
Well, and I think you make a good point there is, and it doesn't matter what level role you're in an organization, all the way from the owner as an entrepreneur, the top level manager or CEO, or a staff member, somebody just walking in the door. We liken it to automotive. I have long background in automotive. To your lot technician or your lot porter coming in and saying, hey, for anybody, if there's a difference between being a problem spotter and a problem solver, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important. You touch on a good point there, Alexander, that if you're bringing something and you say, hey, we've got this hole here, we have this opportunity here, make sure come with a solution, come with what you think the best solution is, right?
Yeah.
And it may not be a good one, but at least it gets the conversation started, like you're saying. And when we're talking about, both Alexander and I have backgrounds in marketing, so it's easy to say, oh, what if we spent this little bit on this marketing, or went over here and did this. But whatever that thing is in your world, the reality is too, and using the Facebook marketing thing as an example, because I think most people can relate to that. Because if you think back just 10 years, it was hard to get somebody to spend, $500. The reality is now, when you're spending 10 times that, do you get 10 times the results, or do you get more than that?
Right.
So you have to look at what's the investment spend, what's the time spend, what's the human capital spend on those things, right?
To that point too, just something that we've found out, over time, especially over the last 5 years, there's still businesses out there that aren't investing in marketing or running ads or whatever, because they still don't believe in it for whatever reason. And it's crazy to think that even if you're not spending money on ads, that you wouldn't at least produce content for yourself, as a business. And the reason I'm saying this is because if anybody that's watching this is in actual business for themselves, or they run a company that does some type of like marketing or sales or stuff like that, and you're still trying to go after those clients that just, they don't see it, I would totally recommend to find a new avatar and target market, because you don't want to be in the business of trying to convince people that the thing that you're selling is what they need. Like that's the worst way to go. And for a long time, I was guilty of that, because I have a soft spot for small businesses. Like if I meet you at a bar or at a restaurant or at an outing or at a networking event or something like that, and you're a brand new entrepreneur, and it's really important for you to tell me that you're a CEO and you're a founder, and that all these titles that you want to give yourself or whatever. Like I've been there. Like everybody's been there.
Sure.
But I have a soft spot for that person that wants to like go out on their own and do something. You know what I mean? And so for a long time, I tried to work with a lot of solopreneurs, but the problem is that a lot of solopreneurs, sometimes the number one person that they need to believe in the most, they don't, which is themselves. So they're afraid to risk, the $50 or $100 or $500 to run the ad for themselves. They're afraid to, spend $1,000 that they have for their business, because they don't want to lose it, but they're not banking on themselves. So, and there's a little bit of growth that happens there. And I forgot, you said something at the top of our conversation. It might have been even before we got into the actual live conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to bring it up. Thinking back to like when I first got into business, and even just meeting other people. And now that my kids are becoming young adults, when you're like in your early 20s, late teens, especially with what you see on social media as a young person, you just want money real fast. You want it like, you just want to buy all the stuff. You want life to be easy. You want it to be comfortable. You want it to be no stress, no problems,
Mm-hmm.
And I was just telling Liz the other day, my wife the other day, it's so funny how you can read a quote years ago and you're like, yeah, I got it. I like that. That makes sense. But you don't actually really understand it until like years later, and you read it again, and it's just like it hits a little bit different. And one of the first people I used to really study was Jim Rohn, and he has this famous quote, which I'm sure you've heard, which is "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." And
Absolutely.
when I first read that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm gonna adjust my mindset and blah 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 blah. But then when you're in the war of like trying to build your business, or trying to make sales for a company, or trying to rise the ranks within your company, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever you're pursuing, we always default to this thing of like, why is this happening? Like, or why didn't they say yes? Or why are they not giving me a chance? Or why? We're always, because we're stressing out that it's not going the way that we want it to. And a lot of times it's because we're also not doing that thing that we know that if we did it, but it's so uncomfortable for us to do, it would probably get us closer to the yeses that we're looking for. That might
Sure.
be you having a cold call instead of creating content. Like maybe content for your market is not the thing. Maybe you have to lift up that phone. Maybe it is creating content. You don't like being in front of a video. Maybe your clientele, your target market lives on Instagram and needs to see the visual, but they hate phone calls. They're more into text. Like it's really specific to the target market. So anyways, fast forward, and the end of last year, there were a lot of different things that were happening, business wise, personal wise, nothing too crazy, but just like it was just weird how it all kind of happened. But I
Sure.
realized after that moment passed that it didn't stress me out the way it would have like 7, 8 years ago. And for whatever reason,
Interesting.
that's when it hit me of like, yeah, like I was just thinking about, instead of thinking like, why is this happening? I was thinking like, all right, that sucks, but so now let's do this. Now we have to let me see, if I do this, then this. You start strategizing in real time as opposed to like, woe was me for about 3, 4 hours or 5 days. So it's really interesting how stuff like that happens. And I think the only way you get to that spot is to actually go through the things, the obstacles that you don't want to face, that you have to get through to get to the other side.
Beautifully said. The I've got as we do, man, you get to riffing on stuff, and I sit here and I take notes, and I'm like, okay, I got this 2 questions, 3 questions, 4 questions. I'm like, which one do I start with? I want to backtrack for just a second, because one of the things that you said is, okay, if you're approaching, and this is definitely, I think, valuable from a business standpoint. If I'm approaching that person that's never going to do marketing, if I'm approaching that person, and so I want to get a little bit tactical in the business side of it here for a second. You
Sure.
said maybe you need to adjust your avatar. That's something I myself have struggled with. If you're, first off, clarify for some folks here if they may not know, when you're saying, hey, adjust your avatar,
Sure.
what is that? What does it mean? And
Yeah.
then do you have some steps that maybe people could go through to help redefine who it is that they're going after and
Oh,
serving?
yeah. No, absolutely. So your avatar is just another fancy way of saying your target market. It's
Okay.
basically, if you could boil down, and again, if you're a brand new entrepreneur, you're not going to like my answer here because you want it to be everybody. Right? Everybody needs to have your thing. You're trying to sell it. That is not an avatar. An avatar is basically a single person that represents everybody that you're trying to sell to, everybody that would be a perfect fit for what you are selling. So if we get, at least when we work with businesses, we try to get them to focus on just one person. So I'll give you a very clear example. A 48-year-old father, husband, who is an entrepreneur, who has a small business in video marketing. That is a very clear avatar. What he needs are solutions maybe for platforms that help streamline communication with him and his team, platforms that help for him to upload videos and in real time have people edit it, et cetera, the communication thing there. So somebody selling that would directly try to market to me, that 48, well, I'm 47, but almost 48-year-old father, husband, who has this business in video marketing. So I
Mhm.
mentioned that the offer, let's just say, was a video platform that helps you, streamline the conversation between the team. And the product that I'm selling is video. So where does the father husband part come into that? The father husband part comes into the fact that you'll be able to reach me where fathers and husbands hang out. That's one of the biggest key things that most people miss. They think that they're just trying to go after the business owner that does the X, Y, and Z. The problem is, if that guy is a gun owner, if that guy loves basketball, if that guy loves watching Disney movies, whatever it is, you want to meet them where they're at. And a real simple way to prove this is, if anybody's ever commented on a post that you've made on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever, we'll just use Instagram because it's pretty visual.
Mhm.
Somebody might comment on a post that you did, or maybe you read the comments and you'll see somebody post like, "Oh, I love this song." and the person's name is, I don't know, Mallory the violinist. And let's just say you love violins and violin and classical music. 9 out of 10 times, you're going to click on her profile and go to her page because she just mentioned who she was. The thing is, you never would have seen that comment had she not left a comment on the same thing that you're following. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Well,
go ahead.
No, please continue.
So I was just going to say, so that's why when you're trying to create an avatar, this person that you have in mind, this target market, that's why you want to get as granular as possible. You don't have to get granular like that, but you will have way better outcomes if you know how old they are, what their marital life is like, their interests, their hobbies, their behaviors, what makes them want to buy something that you're selling, what makes them not. And a lot of times people think they know who they're selling to, and they really don't. They have it so off. They just found something that they're good at, and they saw somebody else try to sell it to this person. But until you really find out who that avatar is, you're going to have an uphill battle. If you are starting out, your first avatar, 8 out of 10 times, in my opinion, is usually the old you. Because a lot of times when we go into business, we have discovered a way to help us out of a situation that we were in prior. So if I was a relationship coach, for example, my first avatar would probably be that guy who is done dating around and wants to look for the real thing. What does he have to do? And I would probably describe the old me and get that down. And that's usually the easiest way to go to begin with.
Well, it's always based on personal experience. We
Yeah.
cater to what we know. I think
Right.
it's really valuable. One thing that you said I want to grab a hold of, and people need to make note of this because I super guilty over here, right? As you're talking, it's like, oh, we want to serve everybody. We want to be available for everybody. It's the same thing if you're doing in business, a YouTube channel, who your audience is for a podcast, whatever that thing is where
Yeah.
you're serving others. Alexander brings up a good point because we all say, well, I want to serve everybody. And a lot of that is because when you're getting into those roles, whether it be, business or podcasting or I say podcasting and YouTube because that's my jam, right? But it's the same sort of deal as you define that audience. You do want to serve everybody because you want to help heal everybody through something you've been through, right?
Right.
When I started this podcast, for example, it was because, hey, I want to be able to serve leaders that to me is an underserved market. People get promoted into leadership, but they don't get the training. They don't get to have these candid conversations about leadership and that it's okay to fail and it's okay to fail forward and it's okay to learn and it's okay to lean on other people. You don't have to know all the answers.
Right.
And so it was one of those, it's like, well, I want to serve everybody in that role. And it wasn't until I was probably 10 or 15 shows in, some couple months in, and someone said, well, who's your perfect guest to serve your audience? And I was like, crap, I don't actually know the answer to that,
Yeah.
So I had to sit down and do some real soul searching and some brainstorming. And I said, okay, well, what are the qualities of a guest that could bring some real value?
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is when I did that,
Yeah.
because it's you're looking in two audiences. One, who is the guest that can serve that we can connect on? And that's one reason, like a lot of guests I have good relationship, you and I have stayed in touch for the last year because there's so many similarities. But once you define that, all of a sudden stuff just starts happening.
Oh, yeah.
People come out of the woodwork. They're like, I want to be a part of that thing, right?
Yeah.
I want to, going back to what we said earlier, they want some ownership. They want some skin in the game for that thing in business or on a show or any of those things. And when you're saying, I remember, and this could seem a little cliche to say, but when you try to serve everyone, you serve
Yeah.
no one,
No,
right? Because your
100%.
message gets so watered down.
No, 100%. And the part two of the avatar thing is literally what you just said. So my first answer was definitely directed towards somebody who is like just starting out. But
Mm-hmm.
if you've had customers already, and this is what we usually tell like the clients that hire us, who again, you could be in business for like 10 years and something's always off. And a lot of
Sure.
times you'll be surprised how many people don't know what they're actually selling or what their better offer is, or they're a better target market than the one that they're serving.
Sure.
So one of the fastest ways of figuring that out is literally what you just said, is looking at like the past 10 clients or looking at the past clients over the past 6 months and figuring out what are the similar patterns that they all share, is there a certain age group that these guys fall into? And when I say these people, I'm talking about the best clients that you've worked with. Like, let's just say you had 100 clients you worked over the past year, and only 30 of them you really loved working with. Well, what are the similarities that those people have? What are the patterns? Is it a gender thing? Is it an income thing? Is it the way their social status is? Is it what they do for a living? Whatever the thing is, do they all have football in common? Whatever it is, you start putting the pieces there, and then you start creating a really solid avatar based off of those things. And the reason why that's so beautiful, if you have that luxury to be able to look at past clients that way, you're only going to be reaching out to people that you know ahead of time that you will enjoy working with, because you have the proof right there.
Absolutely. I think that's very, very valuable, because you can fall in the trap, and especially right now, okay, I may get, someone's going to get cranky that I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You fall in that trap of, well, I got to diversify. I got to be able to serve this. So, I remember even thinking like, you got to make sure that, I have a really good diversity of backgrounds and people and men and women and ethnicities
Sure.
and all the other stuff. Okay, just stop. I think one of the things that you said right there,
Yeah.
and I remember you bringing this up last time we were on the show, you were talking about patterns, right? Because you're a spreadsheet guy at heart, whether you want to be or not. But you look at those patterns, and if the top 30 clients are all men or all women or all, whatever, then serve those people and serve them really well.
Yep.
And it's stop worrying about what other people might think of, oh, well, they might say this about me, or that, I mean, shoot, that's why there are men's group at churches. There are women's groups at churches. There are different denominations of churches that connect with certain people. That's an easy way to split that up. And it's like, well, I connect in this vertical, or I connect in this vertical, and that's okay, because then those groups serve those people really, really well. And so I think that's super valuable that you're saying, hey, look at the top 30 clients. What are the patterns, and serve those people, because you're going to explode to do that.
No, we trust me, we get not so much within the past 2 years, but prior, whenever I would bring up, we're going to nail down this avatar, we're going to create a person, right? It's a fictional person, but we're going to base it off of all these things. And like, oh, well, I don't want to, go just this particular race. I was like, you're not really just going to go, you're going to get other people regardless of whatever race or gender or age group that we put this person in. This is just who we're focusing on right now, right at this moment. Like, if you're trying to sell something to Brad Pitt versus sell something to Denzel Washington, I can guarantee you're going to try, they're going to speak differently. You're going to probably market differently. You're probably going to find out where they hang out, and they might be in different locations, other than the fact that they're both actors. Now, if you're trying to find, if your target market is Hollywood actors who are amazing, who have been in the film business for a long time, then they'll probably both be inside of that group.
Right.
You see it? So
Absolutely.
So people just get hung up on all these other things, but at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is solve somebody's problem, and nobody likes it more than, like, if I hear you come across my screen selling something or offering something, and I literally feel like you're speaking to me, like, holy crap, this guy gets exactly. I needed to hear this right now. I needed this in this moment. So the more specific the better.
We've all experienced this, but I know you're a man of faith. I certainly am. We've all experienced this, and people that are in my audience when I say this, you'll be like, "Yep, I get it." When you've gone to church on Sunday, or you've gone to church on Wednesday or whatnot, and you go, and the pastor has that message, and you go, "Oh my gosh, he's speaking to me.
Yeah.
I needed to hear this right now."
Yeah.
That's the same sort of it factor that Alexander is talking about. That's how you narrow it down. Love the answer to those questions. A couple things, as I do every time, my audience knows. A couple of things. One, if you want to connect with Alexander, I've had this up on the screen a few times, but I will say it to make sure that if you're listening to the podcast, if you want to connect with Alexander and his company, he runs Aviator Media. You go to This Is Aviator, AVIATOR.com. This is aviator.com. That's all one word, no spaces, no dots, no dashes. This is aviator.com. And you can learn more about his company, their strategy, connect with him. I know you have links all on your page. Also, I had up here once or twice, if you want to connect more personally, one-on-one with Alexander, you can connect on LinkedIn, and you look for Alexander J. Vasquez, Vasquez. And I always get ahead of myself before I start promoting that. I put it up on the screen, but to make sure that if you're listening in audio land, that you guys can connect. And what did you say? You have another handle across like Instagram and some others. Is it Mr. Vasquez or?
Yeah, so on Instagram and on Facebook, and I think it's on Twitter as well, the
Okay.
Mr. Vasquez.
The Mr. Vasquez. So TheMrVasquez. So
Yeah.
if you're looking to connect on one of if your preferred platform is another one, Alexander he's an absolutely awesome individual. He's popped in my messenger once or twice. Hey, how's everything going? Like you're a
Appreciate
genuinely great guy, and I appreciate
it.
that.
Thank you.
So
Thank
one of the things I want to touch on, and I think you brought this up earlier, and stemming from our last conversation, you moved from the corporate world, sort of driven or realized by your wife saying,
you. Yeah,
"Hey,
yeah.
you've got this," right? And I'm just framing this a little bit for those that don't know. He was prior to Aviator Media, was corporate, doing spreadsheets and Excel, finance, right? Weren't you in
Yeah,
finance? Is that
yeah.
correct? And so it took somebody on the outside, his wife, saying, "Hey, you need to go do the thing." And what you're doing now is not the thing. And that's how you ended up in Aviator Media. So over time, I'm curious. I have a couple more questions I hope to get to today.
Yeah.
One is and you've said this several times throughout the show. Hey, if you'd asked this guy 7, 8 years ago, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, if you'd over those years of your wife's influence, other leaders' influences, your, years of growth, can you pinpoint a couple of factors that have helped you build confidence in business?
I think the first place that my mind goes to is honestly speaking. Um, like I'm not a big fan of networking events, but when I first started out, I went to all of them right away because I had to get plugged into the community. I was no longer in DC, which is where I was commuting at the time. So now I
Mm-hmm.
had to like in our local town area, like get connected somehow. And I've always been pretty social if I needed to be, but I used to hate doing this thing. But the minute I would start speaking and introducing myself, it helped me get a lot clearer on what it is that I was actually selling. It helped me hear in real time and see in real time how people reacted to what I was saying. Um, I think bigger than that is that when you go to some of these networking events, if you are, heading out there for your first time, or even like right now, even if you're seasoned and you're putting content out there because you're trying to build your brand,
Mm-hmm.
I think actually answering questions that people have there is a twofold thing for you, especially when you're first starting out. It re-solidifies in your head what you're talking about and what you know, but you're also helping somebody else out. But what you're also doing there is you're establishing yourself as somebody that may have an answer that this person didn't have initially. So a lot of people like to say expertise or your authority in that space, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's you're letting that person know that if they have any questions in this realm, they can come to you. And you just gave this piece of advice for free. You didn't even ask for a sale or anything like that. And people like to talk to people like that because at some point, and with this whole thing, it's not about closing the sale with that particular person. It's
Sure.
about giving them value. And here's what happens: like planting that seed, they'll tell other people. And so that's one of the best lessons I had. It took me a while to learn because initially, when you leave a corporate job, you need a paycheck coming in. And now it's not consistent anymore. Now you like need the money. And when you're trying to make a sale out of scarcity, as opposed to like, I could take it or leave it, it's two
Mm-hmm.
totally different mindsets and two totally different types of actions. One's out of desperation and one's actually out of genuinely, I want to help you. And you never want to be in the desperation part because people can smell that, people can see that. Not only that, you're gonna
Sure.
like butcher your whole brand, and you don't want to do that. So when I think back to when I first left and first got into business for myself to now, it's transitioned from how do I make more money out of this thing all the way to, I still have my moments, obviously, right? But like all the way
Sure.
to like, let me just put it out there. And whoever needs the service, they're going to come to us. All I got to focus on right now, like the only thing I want to focus on is what kind of been our mantra for the past 2, 3 years is let's just make as good a product as possible. Let's just give it all away, like on the calls, on situations like this, like on a podcast like this. Somebody wants to ask a question, let's give them 5 answers to other questions that they didn't even have. Let's really leave it all on the table for these people. So that way, when they have the thing that they're able to buy or they need that service, they'll come to us. And if they don't, maybe they'll tell somebody else. And if that doesn't happen, it's up to God anyways. I just got to put the seeds out there. I really got to do my part and work every last means I can to make this brand and this business as solid as possible. And the rest is out of my control. The rest is up to God. And so it's really come full circle with that.
That is a wonderful answer. And I will tell you, take note of that, because I think there is something to be said. I would agree with you. When you start speaking and networking with other people, because I asked you the question, hey, how'd you build confidence? And it took a moment and you said, hey, I started doing this thing, because the things that I pulled out of that too is it does allow you to position as an expert.
Yep.
It does allow you, it puts you in this role where it's like, oh man, people are looking to me for this. But in your own brain, it helps establish that clarity and authority.
Yep.
Like what you were saying. Yeah, okay. Because that's one of those things, once people start asking those questions and you're able to provide those answers, going back, and I didn't know we were going down this path, but going back to what we were talking about earlier, that helps you establish your avatar, right? Hey, my avatar is that person that was sitting at that networking event that we had this conversation. And though you're not pitching them at the time, that's who you want to connect with. So that's absolutely wonderful. As we're sort of coming to the tail end, we're just over the 45-minute mark here. I'm curious also, so you and I talked a year ago, or just about a year ago, not quite a year ago. And as we're headed into this new year, because you do a lot of market studies, a lot of strategy when it comes to, okay, hey, what's going to change? I think it's always unique where people think, like, at the stroke of midnight on January 1st, everything changes, right?
Yeah.
And that's not actually true, right? So, but as we are headed into a new year, and in fairness, like, we're headed into a new political season, we're headed into a bunch of things. What have you seen in the last year that you've taken to heart, and what do you see that might change? What do you see that you did in your business or in yourself that you went after to grow yourself in this last year since you and I talked last?
I think the AI thing, regardless of what somebody might think about it, I mean, it's present and it's here. And as a creative, I am a creative person. A lot of people in the creative space hate AI. They hate that it's not authentic because it's just putting a conglomerate of stuff together, and it's not really like from an artist. It's borrowing from all these other pieces, etc. Or it's taking away the time and soul that somebody puts inside of their art. Like, I get it, because I still draw, I still create, we still film passion projects. But I also think from a business side and just the way the world is moving, if you don't learn how to use this tool, just like social media, if you didn't learn how to use social media, you were going to get left behind. If you didn't start doing Facebook ads at some point as a business owner, you're going to get left behind. So it's just a brand new tool. And all the tool really is, at least in my opinion, it just takes all the information that you would be searching for anyways, that you would be Googling anyways, or YouTubing or whatever. It just really brings it all together real fast in real time. And that, I think, is something that, if you use it correctly, will help you save loads of time. It'll help you be more efficient, depending on what you're researching. So, for example, like, instead of you writing down a script we'll just keep it simple. Let's just say that somebody needs to write a script for a podcast or a 30-day calendar for their social media. You type in a few prompts and you get this whole thing. Now, somebody's saying, like, well, if everybody keeps doing that, then everybody's stuff is going to look the same. This is where I say that part should be what you're posting. That part shouldn't be what you're writing. That part should literally just be like no different than your teacher giving you an assignment, like, okay, this is the things I need you to write about. And this is where you start putting your own creativity. So working in tandem with this brand new tool, you just have to look at it as a tool, because I think it's only going to get more powerful, and I think it's only going to get more relevant and present, whether you like it or not. You have to be unemotional about it.
Right.
I think, since you say last year to this year, I think over the past 4 years, regardless of where you were, a lot of people were super emotional. And just as a man, as a father, as a husband, I think that's one of the things that we struggle with a lot, that nobody ever really addresses within the man circle, is that I think if more young men learn how to control their emotions at an early age, they make way less mistakes, or at least less mistakes based off of emotion. Like there's nothing worse than a man who's very emotional and can't control it, because it leads to this bad aggression, leads to bad judgment. And I mean, I've been guilty of that, and I wish I had that tool when I was younger. And I say all that to say, all of last year and the last 4 years, people were emotional, picking a side and feeling very polarized. The problem with that is that it takes away and it distracts from whatever you feel is your purpose and whatever you feel your calling is. If your calling is to serve people in a certain way, then that should be your focus. All this other stuff that really is more like a distraction and taking you away from what you feel is your purpose or calling that serves you, your community, or your family, your wife, your kids, then you need to just put it to the side. And when you're emotionally mature, I feel like that you're able to do that a lot easier. So based off of how things were last year going into this year, those are like my two takes. I think continue to be less emotionally impacted and distracted by things that are out of your control. And at the same time, leverage these brand new tools that we have that are only going to be more relevant and present, and always stay focused on your purpose. When you're focused on your purpose, it doesn't matter what happens, you'll be all right. It'll always come back to you somehow. So that's kind of how I look at it.
I love it. I love the that closing. We'll close on that. Stay focused on your purpose, man, going into this year. And I think one of the things that bridges the gap, and I think one of the things that you and I connect on, is there is no replacement for that genuine humanity, right? When it comes to relationships, when it comes to life, when it comes to leadership and business and entrepreneurship, and you're talking about, hey, you got to do the AI thing headed into the new year. Well, that's cool, but like all of these things, you still have that human element behind it.
You have to.
Literally every piece that you've talked about today, that we've discussed today.
I appreciate it. Yeah, 100%, man.
So a couple of reminders, and I'll if you got any final thoughts after this to take us out, that would be awesome. The couple of things for the audience. As a reminder, you can connect with Alexander and his business at thisisaviator.com. Also, if you want to connect with him more one-on-one, go to LinkedIn, look for Alexander J. Vasquez, and you can connect on both of those places. I would encourage you, as we talk, like share this show with somebody that could stand to hear this message, because we're sitting talking here about marketing and AI and technology and a lot of these things, but that's one of the things that I always distill down, and having these conversations with you, Alexander, is like there's still that human element, and that's one of the things that's so beautiful about you, your company. You talk so much about your family and your kids and your wife, and I like that is at the core of why we do all the things that we do: entrepreneurship, management, leadership, try and make the money that we do as men,
Right.
is to serve those people in our lives. So any final thoughts you want to share to take us out of the show today?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that if you waited to January 1st to start this brand new year, you could have started probably back in September or November, or you know what I mean? Like it always starts beforehand. The only real things I wanted to just say before we head out is, if you are thinking or in a weird space where you want to change something, it literally is. And again, this is one of those, like I said earlier about the Jim Rohn thing about like, I don't wish it was easier, wish you were better.
Mm-hmm.
A long time ago, I heard like, if you want change in your life, it's just an instant decision. And I never really bought that, because it's like, no, because if I decide to do X now and it doesn't change, you're defaulting back to that victim mentality. When I say, like, if you really want to change something in your life, whatever that is, trajectory of the business, your relationship, whatever it is, the decision is just a decision. I think if we start to own our words, like we actually honor ourselves by doing what we say. So if we make a decision to do something, when we honor that, we build up our self-confidence and we build up the way we value and respect ourselves, which will then lead us to take the actions, whether we feel like it or not, that will lead us to fulfill the thing that we said we were going to do. And that goes for all aspects. And so I think if you're a guy out there right now, and I only know what it's like to be a guy, that's why I'm saying if you're a guy, but I'm sure it's applicable to anybody. But if you're someone who has been kind of shy about owning your voice and your thoughts on certain things that you have been called to just talk about, to help with, to add value to certain situations, I mean, you have control to be able to do that. So just do that. What you don't have control over, leave it up to God. It's literally the simplest thing, that discover your purpose by being real and authentic to who you are. That's how you discover your path, by listening to what excites you, what motivates you. And even more than that, when you see somebody else light up because of something that you were able to offer them or give them, whether that's words, some type of action or help or acts of service, whatever it is, when you see that other side light up, that is a glimmer into like where you should probably be headed. And so I would just say, just consider those things, work on yourself, and just continue to work down that path towards your purpose.
Beautiful, man. Thank you, Alexander, for thank you for I mean, that's a lot of wisdom there at the end. And thank you for making the time for the show, the audience today. I really, really appreciate you. I'm glad that you reached out and came back on the Leadership Toolkit with me today.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you want to hang out just a second while I take this out. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. As always, please tune in each week. That's something that's awesome. Throw some thumbs up on there. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, or subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, anywhere that your favorite podcasts are shared. Most importantly, the whole goal of this program is to help you grow and develop as a leader. And so if this is something you could use, bookmark it, come back and listen again, or share it with somebody else that could use these words of wisdom, that needs to hear this message. Share it with them. That's one of the way that this show continues to grow, is to be able to put that word out to everybody else. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you for your time and tuning into the Leadership Toolkit. I'll see you next Wednesday at 12:05 Mountain Time. Until then, stay great, everybody. Talk soon.